Good morning. My name is Martin Morberg. I am Northern Shoshone and Tlingit. And so the lands that I belong to are in the southern lakes in the central interior of the Yukon Territory. The Tlingit name I was given at birth is Yakakwan, and I belong to the Doklawedi clan. I am also a citizen and claimed by the First Nation of Notchanaik-Dun. I am also the Two-Spirit Program Coordinator at the Community-Based Research Center. So we are coming off a real high from the Two-Spirit Symposium that's taken place over the last 2 days. And so we're just here to really elevate and show love and support to the opening keynote speaker. I will just briefly say that one thing that I've learned about the landscape of Two-Spirit activism across Turtle Island is that the community watches us and the community witnesses the work that we do. And so when there's a mover, when there's a shaker, when there's one of our relatives that are making noise and they're active in the community, they're pulling community together. They're really exuding and being, active in their Two-Spirit role. We see that and we honor that and we talk amongst ourselves and we recognize that these are the up-and-coming leaders. And so it's a real honor to introduce one of our relatives today who I know personally, who I've seen at both the international gatherings, the gatherings that happen within the country, and someone that we invite into the circle here in Vancouver as well. So it's a real honor and a real privilege to be up here to introduce them. So Ozhawa Anung Kwe, Yellow Star Woman, also known as Teddy Syrette, is from Rankin Reserve of Batchewana First Nation of the Anishnabe and currently lives in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. They have a diploma in social service work, Indigenous specialization from Sioux College. Teddy is a public speaker, event organizer, community developer, artist, and drag queen. In 2021, they were honored with the title of Two-Spirit International Warrior by the International Two-Spirit Organizing Committee. This year, Teddy was awarded with the Indigenous Professional of the Year Award by the Sault Ste. Marie Chamber of Commerce. Since 2022, they have curated, organized, and hosted several drag shows under the stage name Batchewana of Batchewana with House of Ever Sick, Bawating. Teddy is the founder and sole proprietor of the Two-Spirit Anishinaabe Storytelling and Advocacy and the founder of the Two-Spirit Organizing Committee of Bawating. I would like to welcome Yellow Star Woman to the stage.
Sit down. What are you doing? My lord. Embarrassing. Ane bojo, Ozhawa Anung Kwe Nadishnakas, Maigan Nadodam, Obajwa Nadonjaba. My Anishinaabe name is Yellow Star Woman. I sit in the Wolf Clan if you're interested. And I'm from Batchewana First Nation group on Rankin Reserve, which is within the city limits of Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. Has anybody here ever been to Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario before? I apologize. Sault Ste. Marie prides itself on being the friendliest city of Algoma. Also happens to be one of the only cities of Algoma. There's only two. They self-nominated that. But my English name is Theodore. Theodore means gift from God, so you're welcome and I apologize. But a lot of folks know me as Teddy. And I am an artist, I'm a social worker. I have a background in social justice, theater, and bingo. So if you find my presentation today a little bit colorful, you're not wrong. So this is my presentation to you as well. I pitched this presentation last year, it wasn't accepted, so this year I get to bring it back. So this is my extended poster presentation. So before we move forward, this is a little teaching I've received from an elder of mine when I was a young Two-Spirit individual who taught me about the importance of accepting ourselves even though others might not accept us for who we are. And it's a teaching that the Creator doesn't make any junk, and that we are given with gifts, we are given a purpose, and along this journey, the Creator gives us helpers along the way to better understand our purpose and to better understand those gifts. So in a way, we are each our own helpers as well in this community, and we remember to move forward in a good way, that we have a purpose, that we're not junk, that even though people might treat us differently, that we do have a role to play in this circle. And I always like saying too that the circle is big enough for everybody. We don't need to stand beside each other in that circle, but that's okay. But there is enough room for all. So a little bit more about me. My pronouns are they, them. I identify as a two-spirit, gender-fluid person. I have two sisters. My one sister calls me her brother, and I'm an uncle to her three boys. And my other sister calls me her sister, and I'm an auntie to her little one. And they can call me whatever they like. They just can't call me for money. I'm in social work. I'm an artist. There's no money in any of that, what I do. So when it comes to an artist, I'm a performer, a background in musical theater, even though I can't sing. I try my best. That's why I lip sync. That's why I do drag. Just easier. I still miss that stage. I've also done a little bit of modeling on the side. I've modeled for Kent Monkman in his Two-Spirit Portrait series, and also his Land Defenders and Water Protector series as well. I remember when I got to the Land Defender Water Protector photography session with Kent Monkman, I remember getting off a plane from Sault Ste. Marie to Toronto. There was no air conditioning in the middle of summer, and I remember I was all sweaty and gross. And my change of clothes was in my bag, and I got there, and I was like one of the last ones, and Kent was going around, he's like, hi, I'm Kent Monkman, nice to meet you. Hi, I'm Kent Monkman, welcome to my studio, hi, I'm Kent. And then he goes, oh, hi, Teddy. I'm like, hi, Kent, where do I go change? He's like, just wear that, everyone looks the same. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I looked like that, like you can't tell the sweat or the smell, but I was sweaty and smelly in the process. If you want to scan that QR code, it does bring up to my social media stuff as well. LinkedIn, Instagram, Grindr. Just kidding. Also a bit of a poet too. I have a poem on Grindr, and it says, I practice reconciliation by topping settlers. So just putting that out there. So in the beginning, and Sault Ste. Marie has a large Italian population if you've never been there before. Growing up, I wasn't raised with my culture or my language or my traditions. And my best friend was Italian. So I remember the first time I came out to my mother, I came out as being Italian. And I was really proud about it. And I'm like, Ma, I'm Italian. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, Shane, he's my best buddy. He's got dark hair and we got dark hair. He's got brown skin, we got brown skin. And they make pasta and we have fried spaghetti on Tuesdays. We're Italian. She's like, no, we're Ojibwe. You're First Nation and you're foolish. And I was like, what does that mean? And she's like, well, sometimes we go to powwow and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we smudge, sometimes we don't. There's the thing called residential school, and that's all I know. If you want any other questions, you have to ask someone else. You have to find other people. I'm like, okay. And that kind of set me on a precedent on becoming a social worker, because my mother always said, she's like, you're going to grow up to be a cop or a social worker because you ask so many damn questions. And I do, when I became a social worker. So in this photo here, there's a picture of my two sisters, me in the vest. Again, I look like a little Guido, but I wasn't. And my two parents. Part of this journey as well has also been a grief journey as well. Prior to COVID, I had lost my mother. And 3 years for that, I lost my father. And my father was my cheerleader. He was my queer leader. He should have been my agent because he could sell me better than I ever could. And I remember when I came out to my mother, it took her a very long time to understand what that meant. And she never wanted any of her children to live a hard life. So when I told her that I was gay, she thought I was living a hard life. And I told her if I didn't go through everything I went through, I wouldn't be able to do the stuff that I'm doing today. Sharing my story, empowering others on what they could do in their communities to make their generations and their children safe. And then she said, whatever you do, don't come out to your dad, because he might have a heart attack. I'm like, okay. And then a year later, it was a blizzard condition. My dad was picking me up from a house party. And in my inebriation, I didn't have much of a relationship with my dad, but I thought it was a perfect opportunity to come out to my dad. It was a blizzard condition. He was like, Teddy, this is not safe. We should have I should have picked you up later. I should have picked you up like later on. Maybe we should just pull the side of the road. I'm afraid we might get into an accident. And in my mind, I'm thinking, ooh, well, if I tell him that I'm gay, he might have a heart attack. And I might be inebriated enough that I won't feel so much pain. Or he would get so upset that I would still be inebriated and I wouldn't feel the punches as he was trying to drive the car and beat me up. Because we didn't have much of a relationship, so I didn't know what to expect. And so I was like, Dad, I'm dating somebody. Who's like, who are you dating? And I'm like, well, it's Darren. And he's like, Darren, that's not a girl's name. I'm like, well, it can be. In this case, it's not. And I'm gay. And he's like, oh, are you dying? I'm like, oh. So I had to sober up really quick, thinking like this was like the mid-90s, like late 90s. I'm like, okay, what do you know? What do you not know about being gay, about being homosexual? I'm like, HIV. Dad, I think you're thinking of HIV. He's like, yes. I'm like, okay. I'm not HIV positive, but I am gay. They're two different things. And he's like, oh, I have a lot of questions. I was like, that's okay, Dad. I have a lot of questions too. And he was like, well, you'll always be my son, and just as long as you're happy, that's all that matters. I was like, oh, thanks, Dad. He's like, whatever you do, don't tell Mom. Because she's going to be upset. She might have a heart attack. I was like, I told her last week. I told her last year, and he's like, that's why you're fighting. I'm like, that's why we're fighting, yes. You're so clever, old man. Now, when I was young, my parents watched a lot of the news and read the newspapers. These two people came into my life as a youngster, as a teenager. One of them was Matthew Shepard, who died for being beaten up for being gay in Laramie, Wyoming. They just had their anniversary a little while ago. I was able to watch a show online of the Laramie Project online, and it was awesome because it was deaf and hearing impaired actors and performers performing the show of the Laramie Project, of the story of Matthew Shepard. So that made me really think about, as a youngster, it's like, okay, that was in the States. What are gay rights like in the States? What are gay rights like here in Ontario? What are gay rights like here in Canada? What do I need to know to be protected of myself? So sometimes even folks will ask me, it's like, well, do you work in the United States? Would you ever go? I was like, I would have to do my homework first to make sure that there are like LGBTQ protective rights in some states. I have to make sure that if I am traveling somewhere, how am I going to look? How am I going to present to make sure that I am in a safe place to do so? If not, maybe we could just do it online. We'll see how it goes. Safer. Another person that came into my life was Mark Hall. He was a young teenager in Ozhawa, Ontario, who was trying to bring his boyfriend to prom. The school board said no. Mark Hall said, well, I'm going to sue you and go to the media. And the school board said, okay, bring him. And I remember that had a lot of conversations within the media, both of these stories. And my father impacted him so much too. So anytime the words gay or homosexual came up in the media, same-sex marriage was also being passed around in different provinces and federally as well. So my father said, Bear. He called me Bear. It wasn't a gay joke. That came later. But he was like, Bear, he's like, we have to watch the news. We have to watch CTV. He's like, oh, or there would be newspaper clippings on my bed coming home from school that talked about gay marriage, that talked about Mark Hall, that talked about Matthew Shepard. And I was really grateful for that too, because that anchored who I was. And it made my mother get on board too, of like, well, why are we talking about these kids? You don't even know these kids. And my dad's like, no, but they are somebody's kids. And we have a gay kid. And we need to figure out what it means to protect him. I also came out as an artist as a youngster, very early to my mother. She was more upset about that compared to telling her that I liked guys. And I remember, and so I expressed myself through art. I had a two-spirit auntie, Rosanna McCoy Ba. She passed away in between the passing of my parents. But she taught me what it meant to be brown, to be native, to stand up for myself, to be gay, to be queer, to be trans. And she said an outlet to better understand yourself is through art. Whether it's through writing, whether it's through drawing, painting, performance, storytelling, use all of that to better understand yourself, to find your community, and your community will find you. And so I did that with art, I did that with modeling, I did that with performing as well. And we're gonna get a little bit, and so everything that I do is also combined with art. So when I was studying Indigenous theater, I got invited to go to an Indigenous theater company in Manitoulin Island called the Bajmajig Theater Group. It's one of the only Indigenous theater companies in Ontario. And I remember on my way there to Manitoulin Island, very beautiful, we stopped in Spanish, Ontario. In Spanish, Ontario, they have a site that was the residential school for girls, St. Joseph's Residential School for Girls. And I remember taking this photo that you see here, and I brought it back to my community. And in between that time, before that as well, I was volunteering at residential school gatherings in Sault Ste. Marie. In Sault Ste. Marie, there's Algoma University, which also used to be a residential school, Shingwak Residential School. And every year they have a residential school gathering for residential school survivors and their families to talk about wellness, to talk about coping, to talk about intergenerational trauma and intergenerational healing. That's where I also got introduced to the TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, that came and documented some of those stories. And I was 16 when I started going, and I took this picture when I was 24, and I brought it back to my father, and I'm like, Dad, this is a residential school. This is a part of our history. This is what happened to Indigenous people. And he looked at it, and he said, that's the school your grandmother went to, and your auntie, and your uncle. And I had no idea about this information growing up. And unfortunately, my grandmother passed away a couple of months after taking this photo. Before I took this photo, she passed away. And a couple of years ago, when 215 children were found in Kamloops, British Columbia, it made me rethink about my grandmother's story, and also my Auntie Laura's story as well, because she also attended the school with her. She just never made it home. So when those 215 children I found out didn't make it home, I was like, well, where is Laura? Is she buried in Spanish Ontario? Did she make it home to Wikwemekong, where her family is from? And some of my family members forgot. They didn't know where she was. Until someone was like, well, I think she went to London. She contracted TB, and she went to a TB hospital there. And with a little bit of research, with the help of my ally friend, he was able to locate her, and she's buried in London, Ontario. She was hired as a staff after going as a student at residential school, and that's where she is buried today. And because she had that little title of staff, some of her documents say staff, some of her documents say student, but there is a marker for her. So there was a little bit more data and research that was going on to her, so we could be able to find her a lot quicker and better. Now, at my time attending these residential school gatherings, I was growing into myself as a two-spirit person, becoming more evident of who I was and presenting myself how I felt more comfortably, being more femme, wearing skirts, wearing makeup. And it got to the point where it was now time for me to understand the stories of residential school survivors and their experiences there, where other survivors were talking to me and telling me about the stories of the two-spirit LGBT kids that went to residential school. They were forced to go to residential school. And two-spirit, gender diversity, and same-sex practices existed here on Turtle Island, whether folks like to admit it or not. A lot of times they were erased, they were colonized, they were impacted by colonization in many different forms. Residential school is one of those forms. Understanding that in residential schools, there is over 150 schools, places like this across Canada. We knew that they existed for almost 150 plus years. We know of 150,000 children that went to these residential schools. My question is, how many of those children that are forced to go to residential school were also two-spirit or LGBTQ? Understanding that gender diversity and same-sex practices have existed here on Turtle Island before colonization. The other question I had, because these schools were run by church and state, that the state of Canada only decriminalized homosexuality until 1969, and that there are many churches and religions who still don't accept or tolerate or respect 2S LGBTQ people. Church and state ran these schools, these institutions. My other question is, how many of the children who were not Two-Spirit learned about homophobia and transphobic practices at these schools and took those as teachings and values back to their own communities where the circle of violence continues, even to this day? The same question that I have too is that even though residential schools impacted Indigenous people in a very harmful way, how many people who worked at residential schools, who had contracts at residential schools, benefited from these places? Because it's not just reconciliation, does not impact Indigenous people. It impacts Canadians as well, settlers and newcomers alike, to understand what this history is, to make sure that this part of history does not repeat itself, that this is genocide, and that making sure that we need to do our best as allies, as accomplices, to make sure that other forms of genocide do not happen elsewhere. And unfortunately, in a lot of the media, it is already happening. So this is just a couple of photos of how children were posed at residential schools to get their pictures taken. The photo right beside it on the top is a residential school gathering in Shinwak, I think in 2022, so just last year. And at the bottom picture there is the first gathering of residential school survivors. So you actually see now too, like how we're losing a part of that history because our residential school survivors are passing away. And so their teachings and their stories are very important for us to learn as Indigenous people and as non-Indigenous people to understand what that history is, to not forget it. Because reconciliation is not just an opportunity for us to get over the history together. That's not what reconciliation is. It's to honor and to understand what that truth is and to work forward to moving into a good way. And reconciliation is one thing, but it's also decolonization that we really need to be thinking about. What were the systems like in place on Turtle Island before Canada became Canada? How did we educate? What did our healthcare look like? How did we do research in that good way? So for myself, as a social service worker, I got into college, and I've been doing public speaking for about 15 years now. It doesn't show because water is life. Moisturizer is good. And I remember my first keynote that I ever did was at the high school that I dropped out of for being bullied. And I remember, I was like, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to talk to these kids about bullying, I'm going to talk to them about allyship, I'm going to talk to them about standing up to their oppressors. And my first keynote that I ever did was 45 minutes of me crying and a 15-minute Q&A. Why are you crying so much? Because I'm hurt, I'm traumatized. And then I remember doing the same kind of workshop and same kind of keynote back at Sioux College in the child worker program. And I would go there, do my 45-minute keynote, and then the person said, we got funding to do 2 more hours, or to do 2 hours. Can you do a 2-hour keynote, 2-hour facilitation? I'm like, sure, no problem, I got this. I can talk about myself for 2 hours. Sign me up. And I went there and I did 45 minutes and I'm like, okay, we're gonna take a break now. We're gonna come back, smoke them if you got them, get some coffee, and we'll come back for part 2 of our workshop. And the educator was like, oh, I'm really looking forward to the part 2. And I'm like, I am as well, because I don't know what I'm gonna be doing. But I decided to do some group sharing, to do some group learning through word clouds. So I put on a couple of letters Indigenous. They've changed to First Nation, Métis, and Inuit now, or FNMI. And also talking about the complexities or the similarities when it comes to talking about queer trans history and experiences as well, and looking at the similarities and the differences. And then moving forward, talking a little bit about the history of what that is like, and as we move forward, what do we need to do to support queer, trans, Two-Spirit, Indigenous queer people in our communities. And I've been able to do those workshops for a very long time now, where it's not just a matter of creating word clouds with communities, it's creating opportunity for people to get on board, to become an ally. I'm saying, okay. And the one question I always ask is like, if I had $1 million, if I had $1 million, if I had $1 million, what would you like to do with all that money, all those resources, all in the world that I can give you to transform and make some changes in your community to support Two-Spirit LGBTQ Indigenous people. And I got some really great ideas. Some people were like a sticker campaign, a poster campaign, more awareness, education, workshops, days, festivals, sponsorship, sending our people to international Two-Spirit gatherings or other gatherings like this. And I remember asking that question to youth because the youth are our future and they're so fucking clever. And they're so funny sometimes. And I had this asked one youth, and I was like, what would you like to do in your community? And she's like, well, my community, she's like, I want to have a pride in my community. I'm like, yeah, what would that look like? Tell me what that would look like. And she's like, well, my community is broken off into like several communities. So we can't just have one person hosting our community because other people are going to miss out. What I think we should do is have a pride bus. Loaded up with stickers, information, resources, speakers, music, drag queens, and then we just drive to all the communities and bring pride to all my communities. It's like, oh, that's $1 million idea. Let's tell your chief and council and try to get a way to get that funded. There's a grant somewhere, I swear. And then like the next day, I had another group of youth, and I'm like, well, what is your ideas? And this one girl put up their hand, they're like, lesbian cat cafes. I was like, okay, you're gonna have to break that down for me. Is it just lesbians with cats or lesbian cats? Either way, it's $1 million idea. Let's get that funded too, somehow. It's business, you know? So it's really great to see that part come into fruition for a lot of folks. The TRC 94 Calls to Justice was made in 2015. I got really excited because it came with an opportunity to have more conversations about inclusion. Then I was strongly disappointed afterwards because Two-Spirit LGBTQ people are not mentioned in the TRC. And we had organizations, LGBTQ organizations and groups saying, okay, how can we reconcile that future? Or our processes or our programs and our services if we don't have any inclusion, if there's no mention of Two-Spirit LGBTQ. So I added on to that eraser. It pissed a lot of us off because it made our work even harder to do so. Now, there was an organization that did try to have a conversation with Murray Sinclair and other Two-Spirit leaders, Albert McLeod being one of them, me. And, but however, it was near the very end of their commission. So they had not enough time to get that data or that information and implement it into the TRC, unfortunately. But the MMIW movement, the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls movement, saw that as a gap, saw that the importance of 2S LGBTQ people's voices needed to be included in talking about the gender-based violence that they faced historically and also systemically and in a modern context today. So tabletop conversations were had with Two-Spirit LGBTQ people across Turtle Island to talk about their experiences so that can be documented, and it became Section 18 in the MMIW final report. So you have 32 points where 2S LGBTQ people can be included, and especially Indigenous people, when it comes to research, when it comes to mental health, when it comes to education, healthcare, policy development, and also when it comes to necropolitics. So when we pass away, how do we still honor our Two-Spirit LGBTQ people after they passed away? And making sure that their stories live on in a good way. I moved to Toronto for a bit. Grindr was really busy. Met a lot of folks. But the term Two-Spirit, I got to get more of a better understanding by meeting and growing those Two-Spirit networks. I met Myra Laramie, who was a person who, where the term Two-Spirit was given to in a vision. She was at the tabletop conversation. She shared the term Two-Spirit, or Nishnmanandawag, with the help of other Two-Spirit leaders at Bushajur, Manitoba, at an international gathering of Native American First Nations individuals. That term was debated, discussed, and then adopted, and now it's known as the Two-Spirit International Gatherings that still take place today. The last one that was held is in Wabanaka territory in Nova Scotia this year, and then next year it'll be somewhere in the States. And so hopefully in a few years, Bawating, my community, will be able to host one of those international gatherings, because we held our first one last year too in 2022. Now Harlan Pruden, the other person here at the corner, very handsome fella. They also run the Two-Spirit Journal. Within their research, they have discovered 150 plus terms for gender diversity and same-sex practices for Two-Spirited people. So terms for Two-Spirited people, 150 plus. That plus is very important because it signifies all the different nations or tribes who are still trying to reclaim or reconnect or redefine what gender diversity and same-sex practices mean for them from a Two-Spirit Indigenous lens. So that is the National Action Plan. It was released in 2021. You can get this, you can order this, you can get them online as a digital copy. I go through the Ontario Federation of Indian Friendship Centers. They just sent me a box full. Like, I need more reports. And they're like, okay, Teddy needs more reports. And then they send Pure later in a couple of days. The Two-Spirit International Warrior, I was given that title a few years ago in 2021. We have one of our fellow royalty members here as well, is Ryan Buffalo. Yeah. So it was funny, I was eating a sandwich and I was like, maybe Kai will get it, or maybe Nita will get it. And then they're like, Teddy Syrette. I'm like, oh my gosh. And my buddy Butterfly, she's like, get up there. And I'm like, do I bring my sandwich? She's like, put your sandwich down, get up there. It's like, oh, okay. So when I moved back to home in the Sault Ste. Marie, I got a message from my chief Dean Sayers at the time. He came up to me at a vigil for the residential school children in Kamloops, and he's like, Teddy, do you have a pride flag? I'm like, Dean, why are you whispering? And he's like, oh, I don't know, do you have a pride flag? I'm like, yeah, what do you need it for? He's like, well, we want to raise a pride flag in Batchewana at the band office. We wanted to do it for the first time. I'm like, I have a flag for you. And yes, we can do it. And I remember raising that flag, and I was there with my cousin, and he took a photo, and I'm like, I really wish my parents were here, because we always talked about what this could look like. And I just wish they were here. And he's like, oh, Teddy, they're here in spirit. I'm like, I know, but I'm selfish, and I wanted them here for a selfie. And I put that on Facebook, and then another cousin messaged me. She's like, check your inbox. So I checked my inbox, and if you look closely, she imposed a photo of my parents in that car in the background. So, and then CTV heard about it too, and they're like, can you send us a photo? I'm like, okay, I got a photo for you. So I sent them that one, but I didn't give them the backstory. So, and in that time, we've seen like the movement in Bawating starting to grow, where people wanted to become more involved. I went to the Montana gathering with Martin and Ryan and my buddy Bren and a few others, and I was just so empowered that I came back home to Sault Ste. Marie, and I looked at my group of friends who always talked about what can an international or a gathering of Two-Spirit people look like. I was like, we need to do this now. We just need to get active and do it. And my friend's like, okay, but my contract's almost over, so we have to do it soon. I'm like, how soon? They're like, November. I'm like, okay, end of November. She's like, November 9th. I'm like, oh, shit. Because it was already the end of August. And I was like, okay. But we did it, and we had a one-day gathering of people from the United States and parts of Ontario and other parts of Canada come to it too. So this is just like, and then this year we did a conversation online. It was just this Two-Spirit online drop-in, and William was there. And he was talking about how the Two-Spirit Awareness Week or Two-Spirit Awareness Day was happening in Vancouver. And then me and my buddy is like, hey, I'm bored. She's like, I'm bored too. What do you want to do? I was like, let's do a Two-Spirit Awareness Week in Bawating. Like, we'll amplify each other's messages. So she's like, okay. And I was like, yeah, we'll do it for a couple of days. And she's like, we'll do it for a week. I'm like, oh, shit. Okay. And then we did it. So we held our first Two-Spirit Awareness Week as well in Bawating and Sault Ste. Marie this year. Next year, for 2024, we're going to have another Two-Spirit Awareness Week, same time as the one here in Vancouver. And we're also going to have our Two-Spirit gathering on the same week. So if you're interested, if you have funding, give it to us. And we do it at the end of March too, because there's like, why are we going to do it at the end of March? I'm like, well, everyone has fiscal dollars they need to eat up. So we will take all your fiscal money. We'll take the scraps. We'll make a poster. We'll have it at the Delta. It'll be great. Also at that gathering, we had one of the first Two-Spirit shows. My buddy, Baby Lala, Jordan Robert Edgecanab, developed the House of Eversick, which is a Two-Spirit Indigenous drag house in Sault Ste. Marie and Bawating. We had our first couple of shows. We sold out our first show, and we had other people end up signing us up to do more shows. And I'm like, okay, that's great. And then he left. He's like, I'm moving to Medicine Hat. I'm like, damn it. Okay. And then I had all like these new like drag babies. little clan. They're like, when's the next show? I'm like, I don't know. And then earlier last year, I have seasonal affective disorder, and I was feeling sad. And I was like, I don't want to feel sad. I should be working on my feelings, but I want to be doing something else. So I got with a couple of folks, and we decided to come up with Pride Nights in Sault Ste. Marie. So we have bi-monthly Pride Nights and drag shows, and they're hosted and run by the House of Eversick and the Two-Spirit Organizing Committee. And we've been doing so much shows now that we're actually doing a New Year's Eve show on December 31st, where we have 17 performers coming to the community, or within the community, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, who are going to be doing a full fabulous year-end party. So, and those are a couple of photos of myself. I tried to dabble in drag 10 years ago, and I wasn't ready to be fabulous in the bars, because I wanted to be fabulous at the grocery store and at the office. So it was an opportunity for me to explore my gender, and 10 years ago my drag name was Theopatra, Queen of Denial. So I also started to do art after the 215 children were found in Kamloops, British Columbia. The one orange shirt painting is a commemoration of them. And I got involved in doing a lot of painting as well, and to the point where we held an online auction for the survivors of Children of Shingwak Alumni Association. They're the organization that hosts the residential school gatherings. And I had 40 paintings donated. Another friend of mine, Ricky Strapp, was like, well, I can donate some prints. I'm like, okay, that sounds great. I'm like, who else do I know in the art world? So I was thinking about all my contacts that I made in Toronto. So I contacted Patrick Hunter, Chief Ladybird, Kent Monkman, and other community members, and we had over 60 items to bid on for this online Facebook auction, this grassroots online Facebook auction. And we had it online for 2 weeks, thinking that it would generate a little bit of money, a little bit of buzz, but we ended up raising almost $12,000 for the Children of Shingwak Alumni Association. So this is just also like a shout out to different two-spirited people who I look up to, have worked with in different ways or times. You see Miss Albert McLeod there at the bottom as well. Manicha Kabi is one of my favorite individuals to work with. We do a lot of work in different communities and different gatherings. She was actually one of the elders at the tabletop conversations for murdered and missing Indigenous women during those tabletop workshops. And I remember she was opening, she's like, Oni, my name is Manicha Kabi. I'm from the Beaver clan. I know all about the beaver, if you're interested. I'm like, Mani, stop it. And we got to work together in Red Lake, Ontario, where Patrick Hunter is also from. Patrick Hunter's there pictured at the bottom. Graphic designer, artist, has done work with the Chicago Blackhawks. Also designed some of the uniforms for the Canadian Olympic team. But he's from Red Lake, Ontario, and that's like a 7-8 hour drive from Thunder Bay, Ontario. And I was driving with Manicha Kabi with her sister. I didn't drive at the time, and her sister was driving, and Mani was sitting in the back. And there's not much to do on that leg of that run from Thunder Bay to Red Lake, just a lot of construction. So every time we got to a new construction site, me and her daughter got really excited because we were just checking out the guys. Yeah. I was like, hey, check out that one. She's like, oh no, check out that one. I was like, oh, that's a good one too. And then she's like, oh, check out that one's butt. I'm like, hey, that's a nice butt. And Manicha Kabi, she's like, hey, what are you talking about up there? I was like, Mani, we're talking about butts. And she's like, oh, whose butts? I'm like, guys' butts. And she's like, oh, gross. And I remember getting up to Red Lake, Ontario, and Mani opened up, and then I went after Mani. And I was like, it's very lovely being here in Red Lake, Ontario. I've never been here before. I was helping us navigate to get here from Thunder Bay. So as soon as we left Thunder Bay, I opened up my app on my phone to get us here. And I didn't turn on Google Maps. I turned on Grindr. And the closer we got to Patrick Hunter's profile, I knew that we were there. And Patrick peed himself in the back. It was great. Some other folks, other shout outs too, Monica Forrester, Janelle Niles, who is a great comedian, great MC, who was one of our main MCs for the Wabanaki Two-Spirit gathering as well. Who else do we have? Oh, Kent Monkman, Dreamboat. Yeah, Jeremy Dutcher. Actually, I owe a lot to Jeremy Dutcher, Ryan Buffalo's husband. Yeah. I'm manifesting it for you, my girl. So one day, just kidding. I'm Jeremy Dutcher. He used to work at an organization in Toronto, and we met in Sault Ste. Marie one time. And he's like, "You have to come to Toronto. You have to come to Big Smoke. You have to come to Toronto. You have to start your career. I think you can do very well here." And his position was opening up at this organization, and it was actually him that got me to Toronto. That really changed my life. So I owe a lot to Jeremy Dutcher. It was funny. How many folks here know George Stroumboulopoulos? Yeah, for CBC, Much Music. So one time, Jeremy had just won the Polaris Prize, and it was the next day, and he was doing a house party, a private show house party at George Strombo's house in Toronto. And I remember he's like, "Do you want to go?" I'm like, "Heck yeah." So I got free tickets, we got to go, and me and my buddy got there a little bit late, so we're in the back, waiting by the sidewalk. Everyone is in George Strombo's courtyard, and he's like, "Okay." I was like, "Well, that's good, we can just stand in the back." He's like, "Yeah, we'll just stand in the back and watch Jeremy Dutcher play." I'm like, "Sweet." And then George Strombo comes out, he's like, "Hi everybody, welcome to my house." So because my house is pretty small, everybody who's in the front of the line, if you thought you were at the front of the stage, you're wrong. Because if you're in the front of the line, you have to go all the way back to the kitchen, and you'll be actually in the back of the house. So whoever's at the end of the line will actually be closer to the stage. I was like, "Oh shit." So sure enough, we get up there, and there's a big piano up these little steps, and then we had to stop, and they're like, okay, just stop right there, you'll be at the front. So I'm sitting on these steps, right beside Jeremy Dutcher's piano, and he's playing, and I cry. I'm a crier. I'm an emotional being, and I cried the entire time. And what made it worse was that George Stroumboulopoulos was like, "Okay, we're going to be live streaming this show." And it's going to be online. I'm like, "Oh shit." And I could not stop those tears. And my buddy Aaron was rubbing my back. He's like, "Control yourself." I'm like, I can't do it. And when Jeremy Dutcher, he was also one of the performers for the Wabanaki gathering, for the international gathering too. And I went up there, and I was all glam. I was all glam as well, and I had top and bottom eyelashes on. And I remember sitting there watching him play, and I started crying again. And then all of a sudden, something fell on the table, and I looked down, and it was my bottom eyelash. I was like, "Ah, shit." But that's okay. So I don't know if we have time for questions, but if anybody wants to know, these are my two dogs at the bottom there, and a dog that I fostered, JJ, in the back. Jack is at my mom's, Jack Russell. She passed away. I adopted him later on. He's 13 years old. And the other little one there is Hortus the pug. You can follow him on Instagram. And don't let that cute face fool you. He's just pure chaos. So you have 10 minutes for questions? Okay. Well, before we get to the questions, I'll just read this one part here. The 7 grandfather teachings here. Why did I write it so small? Okay. Respect each other. Treat others how you like to be treated. Honesty. Be honest with yourselves and with others as we strive to be better helpers for everyone. Truth. Honor your truth and your spirit as we learn to honor others' truths and their spirits. Love. Love ourselves and know that kindness goes a long way, especially those who don't have or get enough love or kindness. Humility. We only know what we know, and we only know what we don't know. We will make mistakes, and we'll do our best to not repeat those mistakes. Bravery. Stand up for others when we are present, and especially when they aren't present. And wisdom. By practicing these teachings, we can build stronger bundles to be inclusive for everyone in our circles, because we don't know who will come into themselves tomorrow. So with that being said, we'll go into questions. You can clap too if you want. Oh no. Save your knees. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Meh. Genetics. Okay. Martin, do you have any questions? Yeah.
This one. Do I have any questions for you?
Oh,
I'm stealing time.
My question
can you use the mic? Sorry, Auntie. Oh.
I'm really shy.
Lies.
Mike, first of all, I want to thank you so much. This is so amazing. But my question for you is, what is a message that you can give? Because with the Two-Spirit resurgence, we're having a lot of people being able to see themselves out in this world, which is so exciting. What is the message that you have for young Two-Spirits that are looking for a place to connect and start their journey?
It's like don't stop asking your questions. Another message for Two-Spirit Youth too is to keep on finding your helpers. Ask multiple people. Don't go to just like the one elder because their teachings might be different from other people's teachings. It took me a very long time to find Two-Spirit elders, to find a community where I felt comfortable enough to access ceremony and access traditions. The first gathering I went to was in Beausejour, Manitoba in 2018, and I was able to have my first sweat there with Charlotte Nolan and Boyd Whiskey Chack and Sharp Doppler. A lot of folks who I was meeting for the first time, but folks who I've also known for quite a while. The one thing I would also say too is for allies and people who are accomplices for Two-Spirited people to don't stop your work either. An understanding too that the title of allyship is not a title that we give to ourselves. It's a title that the community gives to you, or it says thank you for your allyship. Thank you for standing up for us. Allyship is not a 9-to-5 job. You can't be an ally for queer, trans, indigenous, Two-Spirit folks Monday to Friday and go back to being a horrible person nights and weekends. That's not how allyship works. So we also have to really challenge those systems that we're part of and making sure that we're standing up for people when they're in and when they're not inside the room. Because when we're not in the room is an opportunity for you to practice your allyship, to activate your allyship, to make sure that our voices need to be heard and they also need to be present. And understanding that if you're a youth, your voice matters and your community is waiting for you. The space in the community will be there for you and we will stand beside you no matter what you're going through. And we'll help you on that journey because that's what we do as Two-Spirit community.
Moving forward for Two-Spirit people, what the future looks like, and what we're hoping for, and what we're trying to achieve, and what would you do if you had $1 million?
What would I do for $1 million? And what would Two-Spirit, if I had?
Not what you would do.
I'd buy comfortable shoes. These heels are old and they're running out of steam. And Two-Spirit futures, I think when it comes to Two-Spirit futures, what do I see? What would I like that to be? It's an opportunity where we don't have to be afraid to come out, that we can just be ourselves, that we know that no matter where we go, that we will be honored. We don't have to worry about hiding our voices, changing the way we look, that we'll be able to reclaim those positions and those roles in our communities no matter what they are. If we're gatherers, whether we're hunters, whether we're singers, musicians, beaters, leaders, chief and council members, me. I think those roles, it's an opportunity to have conversations like the International Two-Spirit gatherings, and I would love to see those gatherings happening in every community. Just like how communities have powwows, that every community has a Two-Spirit gathering or Two-Spirit festival or Two-Spirit ceremony going on. That's what I would like to see for Two-Spirit futures.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I just want to say Chimigwech, thank you so much. I do have to run to like another meeting right now too in Ontario. So I don't know things about time differences, but I hear it's a thing. That's also a challenge. So if you do have any questions, I'll be here. I'll be back this afternoon and then also tomorrow. I also have business cards as well. But Chimigwech, and thank you so much for offering me here. And there's no words in goodbye in Anishinaabe because we do believe that we'll see each other again, whether it's in this world or the next. So Chimigwech and Bama Pikwa Min. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really, nice to meet you.
Yeah.